I'm Mark Roach, and this is Transcendent. This is chapter 9 of The Stranger. The morning after their adventures in applied foolishness dawned with a particular quality of expectation, as if the city itself was holding its breath in anticipation of something unprecedented. Maya woke in her studio apartment to find that she had been humming in her sleep, not any melody she recognized, but something that seemed to emerge from the intersection of dreaming and waking consciousness. The sound lingered in her throat as she dressed, a harmonic reminder of possibilities that existed just beyond the edges of ordinary awareness. Joe arrived at Meridian Cafe an hour before his usual time, not from anxiety, but from an inexplicable eagerness to begin the day's work. Though he understood now that his work extended far beyond preparation and serving of coffee. As he went through his opening routine, each familiar action felt charged with potential for transformation. The grinding of beans, the calibration of the espresso machine, and the arrangement of cups and saucers, all of it seemed like choreography for a dance that was only beginning to learn, a dance that he was only beginning to learn. Elena had spent the night before reviewing her research notes, but instead of focusing on data analysis, she found herself sketching patterns in the margins. Spirals and fractals that seemed to emerge from her subconscious understanding of the day's mission. When she looked at them in the morning light, she realized they resembled the maps they had explored in their inner journeys, as if her sleeping mind, had been preparing her for the challenges ahead. Leo had awakened with his hands already moving, sketching invisible forms in the air above his bed. For several minutes, he lay still, watching his fingers create three-dimensional sculptures that existed only in the space between intention and manifestation. When he finally rose and gathered his materials, he felt like an artist who had been commissioned to paint reality itself. Tariq's morning began with spontaneous laughter, not at anything funny, but at the sheer improbability of his life having taken this particular turn. A month ago, he had been struggling as a comedian, working day jobs and open mic nights. Now he was preparing to participate in what could only be described as applied philosophy, using humor as a tool for consciousness transformation. The absurdity was so perfect that it made him laugh again, a sound that seemed to improve the acoustic properties of his apartment. They converged at the tram stop on Meridian Avenue as the city's morning rush began in earnest. The scene was achingly familiar. Thousands of people following precisely the same routines they had traversed yesterday and would travel tomorrow, each absorbed in their personal screen, isolated despite their physical proximity. But today the five seekers saw something different in the crowd: potential waiting to be activated, awareness to be awakened, beauty to be recognized. The great transit disruption. The thing about habits, Elena observed, watching the streams of commuters through her dream microscope, is that they create a kind of social hypnosis. People aren't just following their own routines, they're following collective routine, the shared assumption about how urban life is supposed to unfold. Maya stuck her kazoo tuning fork, producing a note that seemed to create small eddies in the flow of foot traffic around them. What if we could show them what the routine, that the routine could be different? Not by telling them, but by demonstrating it. When the next tram arrived with its usual mechanical precision, Maya stepped not toward the boarding platform, but alongside the vehicle itself. As the tram began to move, she began to walk beside it, matching her pace to its acceleration with the fluid grace of someone who had discovered that human movement could synchronize with mechanical rhythm. The effect was immediate and electric. Passengers pressed their faces to windows, phones temporarily forgotten in the face of something so simple yet so unexpected. Pedestrians pause mid-stride, their own automatic routines disrupted by the sight of someone who had somehow stepped outside the conventional relationship between humans and transportation. Joe joined her, then Leo, each finding their own way to move in harmony with the tram rather than simply being carried by it. Joe discovered that walking alongside the vehicle allowed him to notice details that he had missed during hundreds of previous rides. The way morning light reflected off of its surfaces, the subtle variations of its electrical hum, the faces of passengers who were suddenly paying attention to their journey rather than simply enduring it. Leo began sketching the scene with his reality marking device, creating three-dimensional portraits that captured not just the physical action, but the quality of awakening it was generating. His floating artwork seemed to dance alongside the tram, adding layers of beauty to an experiment that was already transforming public space into performance art. Elena documented the ripple effects through her dream microscope, watching as the disruption of one routine created space for a dozen of micro-awakenings. A businessman lowered his phone to watch them. A student removed her earbuds. An elderly woman smiled with what appeared to be recognition, as if she remembered something she had forgotten about the possibility of spontaneous joy. Tariq provided an ongoing soundtrack with his mechanical laugh, producing waves of inexplicable good humor that spread through the crowd like benevolent contagion. The laughter wasn't directed at anything specific, but it created an atmospheric shift that made the entire street scene feel more playful, more alive, more conscious. By the time the tram reached its next stop, a small crowd had gathered to witness these people who had somehow turned public transportation into an art form. But more importantly, regular commuters were emerging from their usual trance, looking around with curious eyes, noticing aspects of their daily journey that they had overlooked for years. "Did you see the way the people's faces changed?" Maya asked as they regrouped at the tram platform. It was like watching flowers open to sunlight. A middle-aged woman approached them hesitantly. "Excuse me," she said, "but what you just did, it made me remember something I'd forgotten about, the joy of moving through the world. Could you teach me how to do that?" The Upside Down Eatery. Their next destination was a narrow alley between two financial district towers, where an enterprising artist named Sage had created what she called the Inversion Cafe, a temporary installation that challenged every assumption about how meals were supposed to unfold. The space had been transformed so that all furniture was mounted on the ceiling. Tables, chairs, decorative plants, even artwork hung upside down above their heads. Customers dined while lying on cushioned platforms, looking up at their meals, which were served in specially designed containers that defied gravity through clever engineering and magnetic fields. "Welcome to perspective adjustment," Sage said as she fitted each of them with safety harnesses that would prevent accidental falls while they navigated the disorientating environment. The goal isn't just to eat upside down, it's to discover what becomes possible when you can't rely on conventional orientation. The experience was profound in ways that surprised them all. Maya found that the altered position changed not just how she ate, but how she heard the sounds around her. Conversations became more intimate. The clink of silverware created new rhythms. Even her own chewing produced music she had never noticed before. Joe discovered that eating while looking up at an inverted table forced him to pay unprecedented attention to each bite. He couldn't eat automatically, couldn't multitask, or think about other things while nourishing himself. Every flavor became distinct. Every texture demanded conscious appreciation. "This is what presence tastes like," he said, carefully maneuvering a full of scrambled eggs that had been prepared with molecular gastronomy techniques that made them maintain their structure despite the unconventional dining position. When you can't eat unconsciously, when every bite requires intention, food becomes something completely different. Elena was fascinated by the cognitive challenge of the inverted environment. My brain keeps trying to reorientate itself, she explained, using her dream microscope to observe the neurological adjustments that were happening in real time. But when I stop fighting the disorientation and I just accept it, everything becomes more vivid. Colors, taste, even thoughts. Leo found himself sketching the scene in ways that captured not just the physical impossibility of upside-down dining, but the emotional transformation it was creating in everyone present. Other customers were laughing with delight, helping each other navigate the unusual challenges, sharing food and stories with strangers in ways that would never have happened in a conventional restaurant setting. Tariq discovered that his mechanical laugh worked differently in the inverted environment, creating spirals of amusement that seemed to follow the altered gravity of space. Humor, he announced to the ceiling-mounted tables, is apparently affected by orientation. Everything is funnier when the world is literally turned up on its head. They spent nearly 2 hours in the Inversion Cafe, turning what would have been a quick meal into an extended meditation on the relationship between physical position and consciousness. When they finally returned to the conventional upright dining at a sidewalk table outside, the ordinary world looked different. Not better or worse, but more obviously arbitrary, more openly available to create reimagining. I keep thinking about that woman who asked us to teach her, Maya said, sipping coffee that tasted somehow more substantial after the upside-down breakfast. She understood immediately that what we were doing wasn't just performance, it was an invitation. The silent underground. Their their afternoon challenge took them beneath the city to the recently renovated City Line subway, where the Transit Authority had installed experimental magnetic levitation technology that eliminated virtually all mechanical noise. The trains glided through the tunnels in whisper-quiet motion, creating an acoustic environment that forced unprecedented awareness of usually inaudible sounds. The effect on passengers was immediate and unsettling. Without the familiar rumble of the wheels on the tracks, without the mechanical symphony that usually masked all the other sounds, people were confronted with the reality of their own breathing, their own heartbeats, their own thoughts. The silence revealed layers of urban life that had been hidden beneath decades of mechanical noise. Maya's kazoo tuning fork produced effects that were startling in the hushed environment. Even the gentlest vibration created harmonics that seemed to resonate in the bones of everyone within range. Passengers began unconsciously synchronizing their breathing to the rhythms she was creating, turning the subway car into a kind of mobile meditation chamber. Joe's coffee meditation device created pulses of attention that were visible in the silence. Tiny waves of awareness that spread outward from his position like stones dropped in still water. People began noticing details that they had overlooked for years. The patterns of light and shadow on tunnel walls, the face of fellow travelers they had been sharing space with for months without really seeing, the small daily dramas that played out in public spaces when people thought no one was watching. Elena used her dream microscope to document the neurological changes that were happening in the acoustic environment. Look at this, she said. She whispered, showing the others readings that indicated dramatically increased alpha brain wave activity through the subway car. Silence doesn't just reduce stimulation. It actively promotes coherent brain states that are associated with insight and creativity. Leo found his reality marking device created three-dimensional sketches that seemed more vivid in the quiet environment, as if the absence of auditory distraction allowed visual imagination to flourish with unprecedented intensity. He began creating portraits of the silence itself, artworks that captured the texture of hushed attention, the color of collective listening, the geometry of shared contemplation. Tariq discovered that his mechanical laugh worked differently in the underground cathedral of silence. Instead of producing broad humor that filled space with sound, it created moments of intimate amusement that felt more like shared secrets than public performance. Passengers who had been isolated in their individual bubbles of distraction began making eye contact, sharing small smiles, acknowledging their common humanity in ways that the usual noise had prevented. An elderly man in a worn business suit approached them as they prepared to disembark. "I've been riding this subway for 37 years," he said quietly, "and today is the first time I actually heard it. Not the mechanical sounds, but the human sounds, breathing, thinking, and hoping. Thank you for helping me notice that we're all here together." The courtyard of temporal sculpture. Their final major experiment took place in a small courtyard between two downtown office buildings, where they discovered a group of performance artists conducting what they called temporal sculpture, the art of transforming ordinary activities through radical alterations in speed and attention. Some performers were brushing their teeth in extreme slow motion, each stroke taking 30 seconds to complete, revealing the intricate choreography usually hidden within the automatic routine. Others were tying their shoes with such deliberate attention that each loop and pull became a meditation on the mechanics of daily preparation. Still others were checking their phones at quarter speed, their fingers moving across the screens with the precision of surgeons performing delicate operations. The effect was hypnotic and transformative. Passersby who had been rushing through the courtyard on their way to afternoon appointments found themselves slowing down, caught by the strange beauty of familiar actions performed with unprecedented mindfulness. Maya joined the performers, beginning to tune their guitar strings string by string at 1/10 normal speed. Each adjustment took minutes to complete, creating a concert of pure intention where every note was earned through conscious effort. The music that emerged was unlike anything that she'd ever created, not because the notes were different, but because the quality of attention she brought to each sound was completely transformed. Joe began performing his coffee preparation ritual at a drastically reduced speed, turning the familiar sequence into a ceremony that revealed layers of complexity usually hidden by efficiency. As he ground beans with meditative slowness, he monitored water temperature with the patience of a scientist conducting delicate research. Other observers began to understand that they were witnessing not just coffee preparation, but a demonstration of what became possible when any routine was approached as a sacred practice. Alina conducted mathematical calculations in slow motion. Her pen moved across paper with the deliberation of someone carving equations into stone. Each number, each symbol became a conscious choice rather than an automatic response, revealing the poetry hidden within logical processes. Other academics and students who had been hurrying through the courtyard began to pause, recognizing something familiar yet entirely transformed in her demonstration. Leo painted a mural on one of the courtyard walls using brushstrokes that took entire minutes to complete. Each mark emerged from a deep consideration rather than spontaneous impulse. The painting grew like a flower blooming in real time, its beauty magnified by the visible intention behind every element. The image that emerged seemed to capture the essence of transformation itself, figures awakening from sleep, eyes opening to new possibilities, hands reaching toward light that had always been there but had never been seen. Tariq told jokes at quarter speed, allowing the space between setup and punchline to expand until the audience was drawn into the rhythm of humor itself. People found themselves laughing not just at the content, but at the very process of comedic timing that was made more visible. His performance revealed that laughter wasn't just a response to funny content, but a form of communication that created connection across the artificial barriers that usually separated strangers. The courtyard gradually filled with office workers, students, and passerbys who'd been drawn to the unusual scene. Some joined the slow motion activities, others simply watched with the focused attention usually reserved for theatrical performances. But all were participating in a collective exploration of what had become possible when speed was traded for consciousness, when efficiency was sacrificed for depth. Personal reckonings. As the afternoon deepened, each of the 5 seekers found themselves confronting personal patterns that the day's experience had revealed. Maya realized that her usual performance anxiety stemmed from rushing through her music without trusting the spaces between notes. By slowing down, by allowing silence to have equal weight with sound, she discovered a confidence she had never known that she possessed. Joe understood that his habit of multitasking while serving customers was actually a form of absence, a way of being physically present but emotionally unavailable. The day's experiments had shown him that true service required the complete gift of attention, the willingness to be fully present for each interaction, regardless of how routine it might seem. Alina confronted her tendency to approach research as a competitive activity, a race to generate results faster than her colleagues. The slow-motion mathematics had revealed that her most profound insights had emerged not from speed, but from patience, not from pushing toward conclusions, but from allowing understanding to unfold naturally. Leo recognized that his creative blocks often resulted from impatience with the artistic process, from wanting to manifest visions immediately rather than allowing them to develop through sustained attention. The courtyard mural had shown him that some beauty could only emerge through sustained presence, though trusting the process even when progress seemed impossibly slow. Tariq discovered that his usual rapid-fire comedy style sometimes prevented genuine connection with his audience. By slowing down, by allowing space for contemplation between jokes, he created opportunities for deeper resonance, for laughter that emerged from shared recognition rather than mere entertainment. The challenge of integration. As evening approached, they gathered once more on their familiar rooftop, each carrying the tools they received at the school in the shadows and the deeper understanding they had gained through the day's experiments. The city spread out below them looked exactly the same as it had that morning, but their relationship to its rhythms had fundamentally shifted. I keep thinking about sustainability, Elena said, using her dream microscope to observe the patterns of energy flow in the urban landscape below. These experiments were powerful, but they were also exhausting. How do we integrate this level of consciousness into daily life without burning out? Maybe that's the wrong question, Maya suggested. Her kazoo tuning fork created harmonies with the evening breeze. Maybe the question is how to make consciousness sustainable, not how to sustain the effort of being conscious. Joe nodded, his coffee meditation device synchronizing with the rhythm of distant traffic. Today showed me that presence doesn't require more energy, it just requires different energy. When I was fully engaged with each customer instead of multitasking, I felt more energized at the end of the day, not less. Leo was sketching the three-dimensional memories of their experiments, creating visual summaries that captured not just what happened, but the quality of transformation they had witnessed and experienced. It's like learning a new language, he observed. At first, every word requires conscious effort, but eventually you start thinking in languages naturally. Tariq gave his mechanical laugh, a thoughtful crank producing a wave of gentle amusement that seemed to make their evening air sparkle with possibility. The best part was realizing that other people were hungry for this. They weren't resistant to consciousness, they were grateful for permission to pay attention. As if summoned by their conversation, the stranger materialized from rooftop shadows carrying something that looked like a combination compass, kaleidoscope, and a music box. His presence felt different tonight, more urgent, more focused, as if the day's experiments had been a preparation for something more challenging. Today, he said, settling into a circle they automatically formed around him, you discovered that habits are not chains, but they're choices, choices that can be made consciously rather than automatically. You learn that every routine contains the seed of transformation. Every pattern holds the possibility of awakening. He opened the compass kaleidoscope music box, revealing complex patterns that seemed to map territories they couldn't quite identify while producing melodies that evoked memories they couldn't quite place. But tomorrow you will face a deeper challenge. Tomorrow you will enter the fourth room. What's the fourth room? Elena asked, though something in her voice suggested she already suspected the answer would be both more and less than anything she could imagine. The stranger's expression carried depths of understanding and compassion that made them all feel simultaneously comforted and nervous. Everything you've been avoiding, everything that you've been hoping to find, everything you integrate before you can become who you're meant to be. Maya felt a flutter of anxiety in her chest. Are we ready for that? No one is ever ready for the fourth room, the stranger gently replied. That's what makes it necessary. Readiness is something you discover by crossing the threshold, not something you achieve before crossing it. He stood, the mysterious device disappearing into his coat. Rest well tonight. Dream consciously if you can. Tomorrow's journey will take you into territories that have no maps except the ones you create by walking through them. As he faded back into the shadows, the five friends remained on the rooftop, each contemplating the day's discoveries and preparing themselves for whatever revelations awaited in the mysterious fourth room. Around them, the city continued its evening routine, but they no longer felt separate from its rhythms. They had become conscious participants in its daily recreation, the agents of awakening who could transform any habit into an opportunity for presence. The day had taught them that transformation didn't require dramatic gestures or revolutionary changes. It required only the willingness to bring consciousness to whatever they were already doing, to approach familiar patterns with fresh attention, to discover the extraordinary that was always hiding within the ordinary. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, deeper confrontations with the aspects of themselves they had been unconsciously avoiding. But tonight they rested in the satisfaction of knowing they had helped their city remember, if only for a few hours, how to wake up while dreaming. The great work of consciousness was accelerating, and they were no longer just students, but emerging teachers, carriers of the understandings that every moment offered a choice between automatic repetition and conscious creation. The invitation to transformation was spreading through every disrupted routine, every moment of surprised attention, every instant when someone chose presence over pattern. And that, they were beginning to understand, was how the world changed, not through grand gestures, but through countless small moments of conscious choice accumulated into a tide of awakening that no force could stop. As they made their way home through the streets that looked familiar but felt transformed, each carried within themselves the seed of tomorrow's deeper work. The fourth room awaited, and with it the opportunity to confront not just their habits, but the hidden aspects of themselves that those habits had been designed to protect, avoid, or compensate for. The journey into consciousness was accelerating, and they were ready for whatever came next, not because they were prepared for it, but because they had learned to trust the process of preparation that happened through engagement itself. Tomorrow would teach them what tomorrow required, and they would meet it with the same presence they had brought to today's experiments in the transformation of habit into awakening.